The neon dreams of Vegas flicker less brightly tonight. This place of celebration overshadowed by the massacre wrought by a gunman firing through the windows of his room at the Golden Mandalay Bay Resort Hotel. From a distance, footage shows the FBI surveying the scene of his room on the 32nd floor. The 2 windows he smashed through with a hammer, the array of 23 weapons, some of them mounted on tripods, enough to fill 10 suitcases.
It's okay to have fear in your heart. It's okay to mourn those you love.
There's no single address for the grief caused by what he did. The 59 he killed, remembered not only here in Vegas, but all across America, in towns small and big, in Tennessee, California, Alaska, and beyond. They're tales of courage and suffering shared, like 29-year-old nurse Sonny Melton from Tennessee, who was shot in the back trying to guide his wife to safety. Californian John Phippen, who was killed after throwing himself on top of his son to shield him. Jessica Klimchuk, a single mother of 4. Jordan McEldoon, another Canadian, who died in the arms of a festival worker. Sandy Casey from Vermont died despite the efforts of her fiancé to stem the bleeding from her gunshot wounds.
There he is. Hey, man. Thanks, bud.
Tom McIntosh was certain he would die too. He'd been shot in the leg. But then James Lawson showed up with first aid training and a tourniquet and got him into a truck.
There was dozens and dozens of other concert goers doing the same thing. You know, they couldn't leave anybody behind. They were running back towards the fire to help more people. You know, there's got to be hundreds of stories like this one.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't.
At last night's vigil on the Strip, Mario Montaneo explained what he'd done.
I was carrying, whether they were dead or alive, as many people as I possibly could. I made maybe 8 to 10 trips back and forth just to try to get as many people out.
Footage taken from a tower at the festival on Sunday night showed the scale of panic as concertgoers ran to get away, many diving to the ground as the bursts of fire rang out. Mari Langer is only 16. She'd arrived early to get as close to the front of the venue as she could. That made it difficult for her to leave. The footage she took shows her trapped for a few terrifying minutes, penned inside barricades, as Stephen Paddock fired from above. There's still no clear motive for what he did, although the scale of his arsenal is astonishing. A gun shop owner in Utah remembers him as just your average recreational shooter.
He was talking how he was new to the area, kind of visiting all the firearms stores in the area, found something on our shelves that he really liked, and it took him a couple different trips, I guess you could say, before he ended up purchasing.
At the home in the retirement community outside Vegas where he lived with his girlfriend, police say they've found an additional 19 weapons as well as boxes of ammunition. Neighbours told the cameras they barely knew him and his girlfriend, that the couple kept to themselves.
You wouldn't even know that he was here, except the trash cans would come out and then they would go back in.
We now know the 64-year-old gunman made frequent visits to the casinos in Vegas. A keen gambler, he can be seen here on CCTV from 2011 slipping in a puddle. You can see him fall more clearly from the side view. This video accessible because it was used as evidence when he sued the hotel for $100,000 but lost the case in arbitration. It's also emerged that his late father, with whom he reportedly had limited contact, for years was on the FBI's most wanted list, a habitual bank robber and con man on the run for 10 years. The police have asked for patience while they work to understand the terror Stephen Paddock wrought with his massed weaponry. For now, there are no easy answers on offer.
We've just seen a couple walking by us here, clutching bouquets of flowers, headed down toward the Mandalay Bay Hotel. There is a real sense of grief and shock still here. Of course, as the day has progressed, more of the names of those who were killed yesterday have been made public. They include teachers, nurses, police officers and military veterans, each picture a story of tragedy and loss. There's 20-year-old Angie Gomez. She was shot 3 times and died as her boyfriend tried to carry her to safety. Denise Beditis was about to welcome the arrival of her 5th grandchild. and Navy veteran Chris Royby recently returned from Afghanistan. The massacre has once again sparked calls among some commentators for tighter controls on firearms. But as our international editor Lindsay Hilson reports, many of those who support President Trump refuse any compromise on gun regulation.
Hello, everyone. Here we are again in the aftermath of another terrible, inexplicable, shocking and painful tragedy, this time in Las Vegas, which happens to be my hometown and Cleto's hometown.
The liberal late-night talk show hosts addressed President Trump directly.
You want to make America great again? Do something the last two presidents haven't been able to do. Pass any kind of common sense gun control legislation that the vast majority of Americans want.
When someone with a beard attacks us, we tap phones, we invoke travel bans, we build walls, we take every possible precaution to make sure it doesn't happen again. But when an American buys a gun and kills other Americans, then there's nothing we can do about that.
But as the death toll rose, America's gun lovers said it was too soon to discuss firearm regulation.
The media, Democrats, have rushed to politicize this tragedy in an absolutely despicable display. They are using this tragedy, why? To score cheap political points and push a gun control agenda.
This morning, President Trump, en route to Puerto Rico, was vague on the matter.
We'll be talking about gun laws as time goes by.
But he knows the debt he owes the gun lobby.
We spent tens of millions of dollars on TV and internet ads, mobilized our ground forces, and put the full weight of our organization behind Donald Trump.
In April, he addressed the National Rifle Association, who want the gun laws liberalized even further.
You came through for me, and I am going to come through for you.
The chair asks that the House now observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the attack in Las Vegas.
In the coming months, US legislators will debate making guns silent by legalizing silencers. It's for hearing protection, they say, but it would also make it harder to locate anyone shooting into a crowd. Guns are at the center of America's culture wars and myths.
Drunk drivers in the United States kill more people than firearms do, but I don't hear anybody asking for car control.
Actually, for the latest comparable year, the US Department of Transport says 9,967 people died in drunk driving incidents, while the Center for Disease Control says 11,008 people were murdered by guns and 21,386 shot themselves.
The reality is that much of it is rooted in the evil inside this one individual, but much of it is also rooted in our laws, which allowed him to get his hands on weapons that are illegal in almost every other civilized country.
The Josh Abbott Band played the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Vegas. The guitarist Caleb Keita said until last night he was against gun control. "I cannot express how wrong I was," he said in a statement. But such Damascene conversion is unusual, and there's no guarantee that this mass shooting will change any other minds.
Lindsay Hilson reporting. Well, Kylie's still with us in Vegas. What is the latest, Kylie, on the investigation itself?
Well, the police yesterday, John, were giving virtually hourly updates in terms of the number of those who've been injured and the number of those who have died. Today, there's been much less frequency in that regard. We know that they are focusing, though, now on Paddock's life, where he was living, the homes that he had, both just outside Vegas in Mesquite, Nevada, but also another home in Reno, Nevada. We know they've found another trove of weaponry, certainly at the residence here in Mesquite. But also we're told that they've seized media, so they've seized computer phones, desperately trying to understand how Paddock planned this, why he decided to do it. What is becoming clearer, though, I think, is what kind of an arsenal he used, what kind of weapons he'd been able to collect together in that hotel room. There are images reportedly showing a number of the guns that he used. I think we can show you those. This is reportedly from inside that hotel room on the 32nd floor. There were 23 semi-automatic weapons and handguns there. I think what's critical at this stage, I know it's a very early stage of the investigation, but there doesn't appear to be an automatic weapon in that room. There are some suggestions that he may have, in fact, customized a semi-automatic weapon. It is legal here in Nevada to own an automatic weapon, but they are very expensive and very difficult to come by, and there is a fairly extensive protocol you have to go through to get one. Semi-automatic weapons are a completely different story, and there are things that you can buy online, modifiers effectively, that you can buy online whereby you can bump or slide using the recoil of the gun to mean that you can fire way more bullets than you would be able to were you using a semi-automatic weapon. That would explain that horrific noise that we heard in the footage at the concert, where you simply hear Paddock spraying the entire area with bullets. So that will be a focus now, I think, on whether or not he had effectively modified a legal weapon to carry out the carnage as he did.
What did you deduce was going on while you were in lockdown? Did you have any sense of the enormity of what was happening?
You know, they came, the news came through to where we were at, which was only a couple of blocks from where the shooting was happening. And the first thing they told us was that there were multiple shooters, which proved to not be true. But what that did was it created a fear zone and a panic zone all the way through Las Vegas. So being inside my establishment there, I moved everybody over to one wall, got them away from the windows, and then we proceeded to be on lockdown for about 3.5 hours. Meanwhile, I was texting and calling friends of mine that were back at the concert, other musicians that had played after we had played, and was able to contact one of them. He actually answered his phone and said that they had been tossed into pickup trucks and were fleeing the scene with police department, and that everywhere he looked in this parking lot, it was just nothing but bodies everywhere he looked. The most horrific thing you can possibly imagine.
Were you shocked to discover that it was a 64-year-old white accountant who'd managed to kill 59 of your fellow Americans and injure more than 500?
You know what we're talking about here is pure evil. And I think people like you and I who are not evil, it's impossible to ever wrap your head around it. No matter who it is, what age they are, what race they are, it doesn't matter. When evil strikes, evil strikes. And you're always shocked by it because it's the furthest thing that any of us could possibly imagine happening. So when somebody carries something like this out, yeah, it's absolutely shocking. No matter if it's Paris, or if it's London, or if it's anywhere in this world where that happens, it is if you're a decent human being, it is always a shock.
Now, your state, Nevada, has the most liberal gun laws in America. Has this incident in any way changed your view of the gun in the life of America?
You know, I think the battle that we're looking at here, honestly, is the intent of people. You know, we've watched people with intent to kill that have used pressure cookers. We've watched people use trucks. I mean, it wasn't so long ago we're all watching the news as a box truck plowed through all those poor people in France. I think the intent of an evil person is something you can never really prepare for. I know that at my establishment there in Las Vegas, where we were barricaded, there was an off-duty police officer from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he came up to me and he showed me his badge and he says, "Hey, John, I'm an off-duty police officer, but I'm not carrying my weapon right now. Are you armed?" Well, I have a concealed weapons permit. And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "Can I borrow your firearm? I'm going to protect the front door of this establishment until we get the all clear." So I actually handed my firearm over to the police officer, which then held point on the front door until we had the all clear, which went on for close to 3 hours. So, you know, evil is something you can never prepare for. You know, if people are gonna create mass casualty and mass murder like this,
Right.
we're watching them do it all over the world with all kinds of tools.
We're joined now by Tony Dumbleton, who's a firefighter from Warwickshire, who had just arrived in town with your wife, Tony. You're here for a 20th wedding anniversary, and I believe you walked down into the lobby for a cigarette. What did you see?
Just as I was coming into the lobby, there was people running past, screaming on the phone, telling people they love them, and people shouting there was an active shooter. That's as much as we knew.
Yeah.
As I came into the lobby, I went to the door to go out, and that's when I was met with a chap with the shoulder, been shot through the shoulder, bleeding heavily, and then other casualties started to come in.
Other
people who had been injured.
Tens, dozens?
At that point, there was so many people around.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot with bits of blood over them. And then we came in, and there was an area set up with a little bit of first aid with two very, very young girls. I'm not sure if there's paramedics, but there was just so many people. So I helped this gentleman with his wound and the first aids, what was available, and we just set up about triaging and getting
Was it a frantic, chaotic
Absolute
atmosphere? I guess
chaos.
people just didn't know what was going on.
Absolutely. What we was told there was that there was two shooters, active shooters going around shooting. That's as much as we knew. So everyone where we was knew there was or was aware that there was two shooters walking around just shooting at random.
So you didn't know yourself where
No.
the shooter was? I mean,
Nobody
was there
did.
any moment in which you
Nobody
thought,
did.
I shouldn't be here, I need to go back to my room?
Yeah, briefly. But there was people there. There was two girls. No one else was helping as much as they could, and we was just patching up. People were bleeding heavily. We was just patching people up. And then when it calmed down slightly, there was a big stampede. People started screaming, so people thought the gunman had come back into the lobby.
Had you ever seen injuries like that before?
No, not gunshot wounds. Not so many.
Shocking night, then.
Not so many. It was just, but the stampede afterwards, that was it. It just went crazy. And
Thank you very much for speaking with us.